All right, we're going to take a trip back in time to 1977 in a pretty normal neighborhood in Enfield, London. Now, when you think of a haunting, you're probably picturing some creepy ancient castle, right? Well, forget all of that, because one of the most famous and, frankly, one of the most terrifying paranormal cases in modern history happened in a completely ordinary house.
And that's exactly what makes it so incredibly chilling. This was just a regular family living a regular life until something found its way in. And whatever it was not going to be ignored.
So this house was home to Peggy Hodgson, a single mom doing her best to raise 4 kids. Everything was fine, just another family trying to get by. Until one night, it wasn't. The first signs were subtle. The kinds of things you could easily dismiss, the sort of creaks and groans you'd expect from any house.
It all started with knocking, just knocking from inside the walls. And Peggy did what any of us would do. She tried to rationalize it. It's got to be the neighbors, right? Or maybe just the old pipes acting up. She was looking for any explanation that would keep her family from being scared. But then it got worse. The children's beds started shaking, sometimes violently, in the dead of night. Okay, that's a little bit harder to explain away, isn't it? You can just imagine that sense of dread slowly building in the house, that feeling that something is very, very wrong.
And then came the moment that changed absolutely everything. This was the point of no return. Peggy's daughters saw a big, heavy armchair move all by itself, and listen to how they described it. It didn't just slide or get tipped over. They said it lifted off the floor, hovered for a second, and then shifted to another spot in the room. Yeah, at that moment, Peggy knew this wasn't a problem with the plumbing.
Peggy was terrified. She ran to our neighbors for help, but what had started as just unsettling noises and weird movements was about to spiral into something so much more dangerous. The presence in that house wasn't just making itself known anymore, it was getting aggressive. All of a sudden, the family was under siege in their own home. We're talking about toys and marbles flying across rooms like they were shot out of a cannon. Heavy drawers were being ripped open and slammed shut, and most terrifying of all, the activity began to physically attack the children.
For some reason, this poltergeist, or whatever it was, seemed to zero in on one person, 11-year-old Janet. She became the center of it all. She said she felt like it was always watching her. And soon, she was the one suffering the most direct attacks, even being thrown out of her bed by a force nobody could see.
Just when you'd think things couldn't possibly get any stranger or more terrifying, they did. The entity went from being this violent invisible force to something that could speak, and that voice, it came directly from young Janet. Now, people who were there, I'm talking seasoned journalists, paranormal investigators, they described the sound coming out of this little girl as completely unnatural. This wasn't a kid trying to put on a scary voice. It was a deep, gravelly, disturbing voice that sounded ancient and angry.
And this voice, it actually became some of the most compelling evidence in the case. It claimed to be the spirit of a man named Bill Wilkins, who said he died in that house years earlier. Investigators recorded hours of this voice, and they even had medical experts listen to the tapes. The experts were totally baffled. They couldn't figure out how an 11-year-old girl could produce that kind of deep, guttural sound for so long without seriously damaging her vocal cords.
With reporters from the Daily Mirror and even a police constable, WPC Carolyn Heaps, witnessing these things firsthand, seeing chairs slide and objects fly, this was no longer just some family's private nightmare. The Enfield Poltergeist became front-page news all across Britain.
With the story now a full-blown national sensation, the professionals were called in. Paranormal researchers from the prestigious Society for Psychical Research arrived on the scene. And they weren't there to believe or disbelieve. They were there to document. They set up cameras, microphones, the whole deal, to try and capture definitive proof of what was going on. And you have to remember, this wasn't just a one-off spooky night or a week of weird stuff happening. The Hodgson family lived with this escalating terror for well over a year. It started with those first knocks in August 1977 and didn't fully stop until 1979. The fact that it went on for so long is a huge part of what makes this case so famous. So, what did the investigators manage to capture? Well, some absolutely chilling material. They documented knocking sounds that would actually respond to questions, almost like it was a code. They filmed objects moving completely on their own. And of course, they had all those recordings of that voice. But maybe the most iconic pieces of evidence to come out of this case are the photographs.
the ones that appear to show Janet levitating in mid-air. But, with any case this extraordinary, there are always going to be doubts. Skeptics started coming forward, and the big question of whether this was all an elaborate hoax has followed this story for decades. So, what's the real story here?
So here's the central debate. On one side, you have the skeptics, and their biggest piece of evidence, Janet herself later admitted to faking an incident, just once, to see if the investigators would catch her. That certainly casts a shadow of doubt. But then, on the other side, how do you explain what all those independent witnesses saw? I mean, police officers, seasoned journalists. What about the voice recordings? And how could two kids possibly stage so many complicated events, often happening in different rooms at the very same time?
So really, we're left with these three big possibilities. Was this all just an elaborate hoax by two clever children that managed to fool an entire country? Was it some kind of shared psychological event, maybe brought on by stress? Or was the Hodgson family truly being tormented by something from beyond? The debate still rages on to this day.
Eventually, the activity in the house did die down, and the family tried to move on with their lives. But the evidence, the recordings, the photos, the dozens of eyewitness accounts, it all remains. Hoax or haunting, the Enfield Poltergeist forced an entire nation to ask what they believed was really lurking in the dark, not in some faraway castle on a hill, but maybe, just maybe, right next door. And that question, well, it still hangs in the air today.